Welcome to part 2, Pitch Your Podcast, also known as Pitch Please. The goal here is to help you establish a pitch for your show, because if you're working to come up with a concept and you don't quite understand what you want your show to be, being able to distill your idea into a pitch is incredibly helpful. And in the world of like TV and movies and content creation, a pitch is really the ultra short summary of what your show is going to be about. I like to think of it as, how would someone describe your show to somebody else? So if you have a fan of your podcast and they're trying to tell their friend about it, how would they describe it? Would they say, have you ever heard of this podcast? It's where blank happens. That's what you want to do, is fill in that blank. Now, a pitch is not intended to go into every bit of detail about your show. It's just giving you that compass, that guiding light of where you want things to go. So in order to get started here, you will need this file here, the Pitch Your Pod document. You can do this digitally, or you can print it out old school like me and get the pen and paper. There are 3 ideas here. If you have more ideas, just print out more of these and you can keep going. I really recommend doing at least 3, because that's going to help you not just come up with an idea, but later on we're going to kind of run it through some tests to see which one actually is probably the most viable idea for a successful podcast. And before we even get into that, talking about pitches, my favorite example to use is Breaking Bad, which is a TV show that a lot of people know about. And if you were asked to describe Breaking Bad to someone who had never seen it before, you would probably go into a lot of plot detail. You might talk about, there's this high school teacher, he's sick, he doesn't have a lot of money, he has a disabled son and a wife who's pregnant, and now he finds out that he's sick with lung cancer, so he ends up teaming up with a former student to do illegal things to make money, so that way he can provide for his family after he's gone. And that is kind of the basic plot of the series. However, when that series was pitched by creator Vince Gilligan to the network, the way he pitched it was he wanted to take Mr. Chips and turn him into Scarface. And Mr. Chips is an old classic TV character, but if you think of someone who's just very mild-mannered, meek, simple, quiet, harmless, turning them into a supervillain, that was really the pitch for the show, and especially seeing then how long the audience was going to stick with them. It's the same show, but that's just a very different way of looking at it. That's one of my favorite examples of taking a big idea and summing it up into a really simple pitch. So let's start out by coming up with a few ideas, and I'll work through this with you on a few of my podcast ideas. I recently started a new podcast that was all about ska, so I'm going to call that the Ska Podcast. If you don't know ska, it's the music with like horns and stuff that cool people listen to. But another idea that I've had personally is I want to do a podcast where I interview different creative people. And I've also had an idea for a podcast that's all about talking about camera gear, because I love gear and cameras, so it's just camera gear podcast. So I'm just going to call it Camera Gear. What you notice here, though, is I'm not trying to come up with a catchy title for the show. If you know of a title for your idea, definitely throw that down here, but I'm just sort of titling it what it is. So I've got a ska podcast, an interview creatives podcast, and a camera gear podcast. So take a few minutes, maybe hit the pause button here, and come up with 3 ideas that you think might be cool topics for podcasts. Don't overthink it. Go with what comes natural, like we talked about earlier. Go with things that you're excited about. So I've gone through and done mine, and these are just sort of some examples. So for the ska podcast, I put, find interesting threads in the world of ska, pick it up, and see where it leads. That's kind of vague, and this is a problem I've had with this idea, even though I'm literally producing this podcast as I'm recording this, is I want to do that, but I'm still not entirely sure what that means or how long it will go. I just know that I'm really, really excited about music and doing a podcast about the music that I like the most. So then I had this idea here where I interview creatives, and the pitch there would be, my goal is to motivate people to express their creativity by sharing stories of others doing the same. So what I want to do in that show is find people, whether they're doing it as a part-time thing or a full-time thing, talk to them, share their story, and do it in a way that's going to make someone else who's listening feel like, hey, I could do that too. Or if I've had an idea kicking around, this would be the time to put it into action. My third idea was the camera gear one, which is camera talk, reviews, and news. Just sort of talking about things in the world of cameras, my experience with cameras, having friends on who know about cameras and like cameras, and just sort of, I've done a few gear-related episodes of my personal podcast, The Enthusiasm Project, and I really liked those, but sometimes I feel like maybe that doesn't fit in with what that podcast is for the listener. And so having a dedicated place where I don't feel guilty about talking about just gear stuff could be really fun, and it could be a cool resource to help people kind of make their decisions as well. Now, you really want to take your time with your pitch and see if it's something that makes sense to you. You don't just want to say it's a podcast where I talk to my friends, because that isn't something that a listener is necessarily going to be interested in. Think about if we looked up, in a podcast directory and we saw your artwork there and we saw the title of your show and this was a little description. Your pitch is the description that's going to help people decide if they want to click on that show or not. Is your pitch going to create the itch of curiosity in the listener, which will make them click on it and listen to it? Now, I can tell you here that I think all three of my ideas could happen. I think the interview creatives is probably the most clear cut because it's just finding people and interviewing them. I think the ska podcast sounds like the most fun to me personally, but it's also the most vague. And I think the camera gear one is kind of somewhere in the middle where it sounds really fun. My concern is that I might run out of things to talk about. So if you haven't finished this yet, take a few moments to do that. If you have finished it, now take a few minutes to kind of look through and really see how you feel about it, or if you have any other ideas that you want to add as additional options on another sheet. And finally, now that we've got our pitch taken care of, you might even want to test it out on some people. Like if you have people in your household, you could go up to them and say like, hey, here's some ideas. Here's a concept. Here's a pitch. Maybe don't even tell them the concept. Just say, here's an idea for a podcast, and then pitch them on your idea. And now that your creative riches have come up with these pitches for all these different niches, now it's the time to take these ideas and really kind of break them down and see if any of them are sustainable for an actual show. So that's going to be part 3, which is all about mapping out the idea for your podcast.